Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring some really fascinating concepts
Yeah.
from a book called The Omega Singularity, Universal Mind and the Fractal Multiverse
Mm.
by Alex M. Vikoloff.
It's a good one.
It is a good one. You can find it as a Kindle ebook or an Audible audiobook if you want to check it out.
Yeah.
So to kind of set the stage for our discussion,
Yeah.
Vikoloff, this book really dives into the idea that,
Mm.
what if our universe is actually
Right.
not just like random matter and energy, but like a meticulously designed
Yes.
virtual reality.
Yeah, like a simulation.
Yeah.
In essence.
Man, and so, we're going to kind of unpack that idea
Okay.
and see where it leads us.
All right. Sounds good.
So to start off, when we talk about this meticulously designed virtual reality,
Right.
where do we even begin with that concept?
Well, Vikoloff brings up this really interesting concept called the Omega Singularity. And you can kind of think of it as like the ultimate source code, like the origin point of everything we experience as being real.
Okay.
And he posits that it's a higher dimensional entity that's sort of projecting our reality, almost like a cosmic projector beaming out a holographic universe.
Holographic universe. I mean, that's
Right.
that's a big jump from how most of us
It
think,
is,
isn't it?
but he really kind of digs into this concept and uses the holographic principle from physics,
Okay.
which suggests that all of the information in a 3D space
Yeah.
can actually be encoded on its 2D boundary.
So like how a hologram,
Absolutely.
like a 2D hologram can look 3D.
Yeah, like a 2D hologram can create the illusion of a 3D object.
Right.
And so that's kind of the idea here.
Okay.
It's a complex concept, but just to kind of wrap your head around it,
Okay.
imagine a black hole.
Okay.
Super dense object, right?
Yep.
Tons of information trapped inside.
Right.
And physicists like Jacob Bekenstein discovered that the information content of a black hole is proportional to the surface area of its event horizon.
Okay.
That 2D boundary from which nothing can escape, not even light.
So you're saying that our 3D reality
Mm-hmm.
could be like a projection of information
Yeah.
from some distant 2D surface.
That's the idea.
That's wild.
I know, and where it gets even more interesting is that he connects this holographic principle to the concept of a fractal multiverse.
So fractals like those repeating patterns
Yes.
we see in nature.
Coastlines, snowflakes, the structure of our own brains, they all have these fractal patterns.
Right.
And Vikoloff is suggesting that the universe itself might be structured like a giant fractal,
Wow.
with similar patterns repeating at different scales from the subatomic to the cosmic.
So like if you zoom in on a galaxy, it might kind of
Exactly.
look
It's like a
at
solar system.
Exactly. It might
Right.
look like a solar system, which might look like an atom.
Right.
It's this incredibly elegant and efficient way to organize a universe.
Yeah. It's like packing so much complexity into a seemingly simple structure.
Right.
And this is where Vikoloff introduces the real game changer. He proposes that the Omega Singularity, this ultimate source code we talked about earlier, is actually what's driving this holographic fractal reality.
Okay, so we've got this Omega Singularity
Right.
projecting a holographic fractal universe.
Yeah.
But where does consciousness fit into all of this?
Right. Well, that's where it gets really interesting because Vikoloff argues that consciousness is not just some byproduct of the physical world,
Okay.
but the foundation of it.
Okay.
He's flipping the script on traditional materialism and suggesting that it's not matter first, then mind,
Right.
but mind first, then matter.
So you're saying that instead of our brains generating consciousness,
Yeah.
consciousness is actually generating our experience of the physical world.
That's the core concept, and to really grasp the implications of that,
Okay.
Vikoloff takes us on a journey into the nature of consciousness itself.
All right, so how deep are we going here?
Well, pretty deep.
Okay.
Vikoloff dives into some profound philosophical territory, actually connecting his ideas to the work of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin.
Teilhard de Chardin.
Yeah.
You know him.
He's the one who came up with the idea of the omega point.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
Teilhard de Chardin believed that the universe is evolving towards a point of ultimate complexity and consciousness, which he called the omega point.
Right.
And Vikoloff seems to be drawing a parallel here,
Okay.
suggesting that the Omega Singularity might be a similar concept, the ultimate source and destination of all consciousness.
So are we talking about some kind of like universal mind that
Yeah.
we're all
Mm.
connected to?
That's one of the mind-boggling implications that Vikoloff puts forward and really makes you question the nature of reality.
It does.
Are we all individual expressions of a single unified consciousness emanating from the Omega Singularity?
That brings up so many questions about, like
I know.
Individual identity and purpose, right? Like, what does it even mean to be you
Right.
in this context?
Yeah, and the meaning of life.
Exactly. All these big existential questions come into play.
Yeah. And Vikolov
Yeah.
doesn't shy away from those questions.
No, he doesn't. He challenges us to consider the possibility that we are far more interconnected and far more powerful than we realize.
So this is where things start to get really interesting for me.
Oh, yeah.
Because if our universe is a kind of holographic projection from the Omega Singularity,
Yeah.
and if consciousness is fundamental to this reality,
Right.
could we, in theory, influence the projection?
That is a question we're going to explore in part 2.
Okay.
But for now, it's worth considering the possibility that our thoughts, beliefs, and intentions might have a far greater impact on reality than we traditionally assume.
So are you saying we could, like, hack the code of the universe?
Well, let's just say that the Omega Singularity opens up some very intriguing possibilities.
Okay.
And Vikolov provides a roadmap for exploring those.
Okay, so for our listeners, we've covered a lot of ground here. Yeah, we have. In this first part of our deep dive,
A lot of ground.
we've gone from the Omega Singularity to holographic universes to fractal patterns
Yeah.
and this mind-bending idea that consciousness might be the foundation of it all.
It's pretty wild stuff.
It is.
But we've only scratched the surface.
Okay.
In part 2, we're going to delve deeper into Vikolov's ideas about the cybernetic theory of mind, the potential for mind uploading, and the possibility of a cybernetic singularity.
Oh, boy.
I know, right? Buckle up, everybody.
Yeah, things are about to get even more interesting.
They are. So welcome back to our deep dive into the Omega Singularity. You know, one of the things that really struck me about Vikolov's work is how he kind of seamlessly blends science and spirituality.
Yeah, it's not like he shies away from those big questions about, the nature of consciousness, our purpose, even the concept of God.
Right, exactly.
But he approaches it from a very scientific perspective.
Yeah, he's using physics, computer science, even cybernetics to kind of explore these ideas.
Yeah, it's like he's saying, hey, science can be spiritual and spirituality can be scientific.
Exactly. And that leads us to one of the most thought-provoking sections of the book, I think, where he introduces his cybernetic theory of mind.
Okay, CTM. So what is this cybernetic theory of mind all about?
Well, at its core, he argues that consciousness is essentially information processing. But here's the key. He believes that this information processing isn't limited to the physical brain.
Okay, so consciousness could exist outside of our bodies.
Potentially, yeah.
Hmm.
He introduces this concept of substrate independence, meaning that consciousness isn't dependent on any particular physical form.
Okay.
Like it could exist in a computer, a network, even a beam of light, as long as there's a structure capable of processing information in a complex way.
So that's a pretty radical concept. I mean, if consciousness can exist independently of the brain, does that mean we could one day transfer our minds into, more durable forms? Could we achieve, like, digital immortality?
Well, Vikolov explores that very possibility. He delves into concepts like whole brain emulation and mind uploading, which involve creating a digital replica of the brain's structure and functions.
I mean, that sounds like science fiction.
Yeah.
Is there any scientific basis for thinking this could actually be possible?
It's definitely cutting edge, but there's a growing body of research in neuroscience and computer science that suggests it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility. Researchers are already working on technologies that can interface directly with neurons, allowing us to read and even write information to the brain.
So you're talking about the potential to literally download our consciousness into a computer.
That's the long-term goal. Of course, there are enormous technical and ethical challenges to overcome. We're talking about replicating the complexity of trillions of neural connections and the subtleties of human experience. But Vikolov argues that given the exponential pace of technological advancement, it's not a matter of if this will happen, but when.
Wow. Okay, so let's assume for a moment that mind uploading becomes a reality. What happens to our sense of self, our individuality? Would we still be us in a digital form?
That's a big question that Vikolov grapples with. He acknowledges the possibility of losing our sense of individuality, of becoming absorbed into a kind of collective consciousness, and he also explores the potential for merging with artificial intelligence, creating a hybrid intelligence that surpasses human capabilities.
That raises some pretty significant ethical questions. How do we ensure that individual autonomy is respected in a world where minds can be copied, merged, or even erased?
Yeah, these are precisely the kind of dilemmas Vikolov wants us to consider. He's not just presenting a utopian vision of a technologically advanced future. He's asking us to think critically about the implications of these powerful technologies and to approach them with a sense of responsibility.
It seems like he's suggesting that we're on the cusp of a major evolutionary leap, a transformation that could redefine what it means to be human.
He calls this the cybernetic singularity, a point in the not-too-distant future where technology and consciousness merge, leading to the emergence of a new kind of being.
So instead of biological evolution, we're talking about a cybernetic evolution, and what would this new kind of being be like?
Well, Vikolov paints a picture of a future where consciousness is no longer confined to biological forms, where we can explore vast virtual realms, merge our minds with others, and even potentially interface directly with the Omega singularity itself.
Okay, so that's a pretty mind-blowing vision, but also a bit unsettling. I mean, what happens to our values, our beliefs, our sense of purpose in a world where the boundaries between the physical and the digital, the human and the artificial become increasingly blurred?
That's a great question, and it's one we'll explore further in part 3 of our deep dive. But for now, I think it's important to recognize that the future Vikolov describes is not some predetermined fate. It's a set of possibilities, and the choices we make today will shape the reality we create tomorrow.
So we're not just passive passengers on this journey towards the cybernetic singularity. We have the power to influence the direction it takes.
Exactly. The Omega Singularity is a call to action, an invitation to become conscious participants in this unfolding evolutionary process.
All right, listeners, take a deep breath and get ready, because in part 3, we're going to dive into the really mind-bending stuff, the potential for reality hacking, and what it means to become the game master of our own existence. Welcome back to our deep dive. You know, we've covered some really mind-bending territory in the last 2 parts.
We have.
You know, from holographic universes to the potential for mind uploading, and
It's a lot to take in.
yeah. And this idea of the cybernetic singularity,
Yeah.
it's a lot. So now we're in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
And I think it's time to tackle the ultimate question, right? If reality is a simulation,
Yeah.
can we hack it?
Good question.
Can we bend the rules? Can we become like the architects of our own reality, the game masters of our own existence?
Like Neo and the Matrix.
Exactly. So where does Vikolov stand on this idea of reality hacking?
Well, he doesn't dismiss it at all, actually. In fact, he embraces the possibility, but he does so with a sense of wonder and caution.
Okay.
He argues that if reality is fundamentally information-based, then it's inherently programmable.
Okay.
We might not be looking at rows of green code raining down like in the movie,
Right.
but the underlying principles could be very similar.
So are you saying we could like bend the rules of reality?
Yeah.
Like Neo stopping bullets?
Oh, Vikolov is a little more nuanced than that.
Huh.
He points out that we're already hacking reality, in a sense, through science and technology, even art.
That's true.
We've learned to manipulate the laws of physics. We create artificial intelligence. We explore virtual worlds that blur the lines between the physical and the digital.
Yeah, I mean, we've come a long way from rubbing sticks together
We have.
to make fire.
Absolutely.
But how do we go from like manipulating matter to, you know, influencing events with our thoughts or teleporting ourselves across galaxies? And that sounds like magic, not science.
Well, Vikolov would say it's about expanding our understanding of what's possible.
Okay.
He argues that we need to shift away from this purely materialistic worldview
Okay.
that limits our understanding of consciousness and its potential.
So we need to kind of like upgrade our mental operating system.
Exactly. He calls for a new paradigm that recognizes the interconnectedness of all things and the primacy of consciousness in shaping reality.
Okay, so we're talking about moving from like a passive view of reality to like an active one.
Yeah, where we recognize ourselves as co-creators.
Okay, that's empowering, but it's also a bit overwhelming.
Huh.
If we're all co-creating reality all the time, even unconsciously, does that mean we're responsible for everything that happens?
Okay, he doesn't suggest that we control every aspect of reality, but rather that we influence it
Okay.
through our thoughts, beliefs, and intentions.
Okay.
It's about becoming more conscious of those influences and learning to align them with our desired outcomes.
Okay, so what are some practical steps we can take to become more conscious creators?
Well, Vikolov suggests a number of practices that can help us tap into the deeper potential of our consciousness.
Okay.
Things like meditation, mindfulness, cultivating a deep understanding of the flow of information and energy.
So we need to become like Jedi Masters of the Mind.
Yeah, kind of. It's about developing our mental and emotional intelligence.
Okay.
Learning to control our thoughts and emotions, to focus our intention with clarity and purpose, to recognize the interconnectedness of all things.
Okay. But is there any evidence that these practices can actually influence reality?
Well, there's a growing body of research in fields like quantum physics and parapsychology that suggests consciousness may have a non-local impact on the physical world.
Okay.
But even beyond the scientific evidence, there's the power of personal experience.
Okay.
Many people who engage in these practices report profound shifts in their perception of reality and their ability to manifest their intentions.
So it's about combining like the scientific understanding of the universe with like the inner work of personal transformation.
Exactly. And Vikolov provides a roadmap for this journey. He calls it living as the game master,
Okay.
embracing the idea that we have the power to shape our reality and to co-create a future that reflects our highest aspirations.
That's inspiring.
It
It's
is.
like taking the red pill and waking up to this whole new level of possibility.
Yeah, it's not about escaping reality, but about engaging with it more fully, more consciously, and more creatively.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing our inherent connection to the Omega Singularity, the source of all consciousness and creativity.
So this has been an incredible journey, exploring these ideas from the Omega Singularity.
It has been.
We've gone from holographic universes and fractal patterns to mind uploading the cybernetic singularity, even this idea of reality hacking.
Yeah, we covered a lot.
It's really challenged my assumptions about what's real and what's possible.
That's the beauty of exploring these ideas. It expands our awareness, it stretches our imagination, it opens us up to a universe of possibilities.
It really does. So, to our listeners, if you're ready to take the red pill and explore the depths of the Omega Singularity, Universal Mind, and the Fractal Multiverse, you can find it as a Kindle ebook or an Audible audiobook. And remember, the future is not set in stone.
Right.
We are the architects of our own reality, the game masters of our own destinies.
Yeah.
Choose wisely.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks, everyone.
Extadelic Media.